Tonight's debate between the two candidates for mayor of Attleboro, sponsored by the Sun Chronicle. Tonight's debate is being televised live by AACS. My name is Peter Gay. I am a lifelong resident of Attleboro and a voter, and I will say it's happy to be back home. Like many of you, I will be listening closely to the candidates this evening before I head to the polls on November 5th. Those candidates to my immediate right, incumbent Mayor Paul Heroux and his challenger, City Council Vice President Heather Perica. In addition to answering questions from each other later on in the evening, the two will answer questions from our three panelists, former Sun Chronicle editor and now columnist Mike Kirby, Sun Chronicle correspondent and former news editor Tom Riley, and Sun Chronicle columnist Bill Gouveia. The timer is Bridget Gay. Before we begin, and I'm sure anyone who's ever sat in one of these chairs up here, by the way, the chairs are absolutely lovely. New chairs, and they are blue, which is sensational. This room is kind of like a fireplace. I always say this. Instead of the air feeding the fireplace, it's the noise, especially from the back, that comes to the front. So I would ask you, please, if you were in a conversation or want to make a content or have to accept a phone call, to please step outside. And I will make sure my phone is on silent if you could do the same. These two have agreed to take part in this debate, and I'd hate for them to be distracted at all. Also, if you could, please refrain from clapping any other remarks during the debate. You may be here supporting someone, say something, and you might end up distracting your candidate. So if you could be quiet, that would be sensational. To the candidates, I have the utmost respect for the two of you and ask that you don't put me in the position of having to interrupt you if you speak beyond the allotted time. First time, I'll give you a little leeway, but then I will crack down. Please keep an eye on the time cues that will be given by Bridget. She has a time cue for 1 minute. It's a green piece of paper. 30 seconds, a green piece of paper. Yellow means 10 seconds, and I would suggest at 10 seconds, finish up your remark, and then the pink, I couldn't find a red piece of paper, but pink for stop. So let's begin. The candidates will have 2 minutes each to make an opening statement. We flipped a coin moments ago, and Heather Perica won the coin toss. She elected to be candidate A on our format sheets here, and will deliver the first 2-minute opening statement. Heather?
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you to the Sun Chronicle for hosting this event tonight, and to AACS for sharing the event with the city, and those of you here in the audience watching at home, and those of you at home watching, taking time to participate in the process. Tonight is critical to the future of our community, and I'm excited to share my plans for our collective success with you. My involvement in and my love for our city started with my faith, it grew with my family, and expanded with our community. My husband and I moved here 20 years ago and immediately became involved in St. John's Parish as a catechist, working with many of your children. As my own children got older, I became involved in their sports, and schools, and other organizations. I spent 10 years as a bus driver, bringing many of your children safely to and from school. I became a member of the Attleboro Farmers Market, and under my leadership, it has grown to one of the most successful markets in New England. Finally, I have been your at-large city councilor for 6 years, and as a team, we have done everything within our power to advance our city. Now I want to take the next step in my life of service to this community. I don't want to just have the job of mayor. I want to do the work of the mayor. I want to bring everyone to my table to work for the common good. I want business owners at my table talking about how I can support and assist them in helping us renew and refresh our downtown and foster positive working relationships with our state and municipal departments. I want to address the lack of sustainability in our school department budget so that our incredible educators at all levels feel the support that they deserve. I was raised believing leaders eat last. I'm just like my mom, and that when we had family and friends in our home, my priority is to make sure that everybody has what they need. I provide for others before I help myself. This is what I want to bring to our community as mayor. I want to provide the services that my neighbors need in a collaborative and supportive way so that we can move towards our shared vision for Attleboro. Thank you again, and I look forward to sharing my plan and vision with all of you tonight.
Mayor, you have 2 minutes.
Very good. It's really nice to be here again with all of you. This is the most rewarding job I've ever had. It comes with a lot of headaches. It's a lot of work. It's a 24-hour, 7 job, but it is the most rewarding job I've ever had, and I really enjoy it. We have a lot of good projects going on here at Attleboro. Some projects that the previous mayor started, some projects that I've started. The work of the mayor is basically to do 2 things. It's to take care of the city departments because they're the ones who provide the services for citizens, but it's also to make sure that there is a vision for the city and the city is actually moving forward in a comprehensive way. The different department heads are people that I work really closely with, and I have an excellent relationship with every department head. And with respect to the different projects that are going on in the city, there are certain projects that I started that I'm looking forward to seeing finished through to completion. So for example, with downtown revitalization, we have a lot of really good things going on with downtown revitalization. We're going to talk about that tonight. We also have the energy policy that's being transformed in the city. We'll probably talk about that as well. And we also have Highland Park, and I have some really big plans for Highland Park. My commitment to Attleboro is quite long. I grew up here. I graduated high school here. I worked at the Attleboro YMCA for 7 years between 1996 and 2003. I grew up on Union Street. So this is a community that I come from. I moved away for 10 years, but I came back to this community. I really think of this community as home. I mean, it's not just where I live, it's home. And my family is from here, my friends are from here, and I really enjoy serving in the capacity as mayor of Attleboro. So thank you.
The format for this evening is a little different than past formats I put together. In the past, our panelists would ask a question. It would be answered by each of the candidates. The question is purposely asked in such a way that it can be answered by both candidates. They won't be asking a question of the councilor or the question of a mayor. It will be offered to 2 of them. What we've done in the past is they have 90 seconds to answer, then we move on to the next question. And I feel as though sometimes we leave some of the meat on the bone. So this format will allow each of them, after they get 90 seconds to answer, a minute to then comment on each other's responses. So I'm hoping it will be a good format. The first question of the evening will be asked by Mike Kirby. The mayor will be the first to answer, and both the mayor and the councilor will have 90 seconds. Mike?
Mayor, while Highland Park's days as a golf course appear to be over, there may be a possibility of bringing some revenue with the clubhouse and banquet facilities. Are there any hopes of monetizing the sale of this prime land and keep it from becoming a burden on taxpayers?
No, that's an excellent question, and when we purchased Highland, the thing that I was looking at doing was hopefully leasing it out to a banquet hall or a restaurant. We've explored that option, and it doesn't seem to be any appetite in it. The cost to fix up Highland Clubhouse would be anywhere from $500,000 up to as much as $800,000. And we've actually brought in different vendors, different people who were interested in leasing it, and a couple of them who were even interested in buying it. As it turns out, it's basically cost prohibitive for them to do that in a leasing format. So the appetite for also buying it is sort of diminished, but there are a couple of people that I've been talking to. One individual in particular, he owns several liquor stores in Attleboro, and he'd like to open up a restaurant there. What I'd like to do, though, is actually sell the clubhouse, and by law, if we sold the clubhouse, we would have to take that money and pay down the debt that we took out to purchase Highland, but then go back to the council with the support of the community, particularly the arts community, and ask the council to use that money that we sold it for to help build a performing arts venue. So that's something that there's a lot of people really excited about that idea. It wouldn't take money away from any department. It would be money that originated on Highland Park and then would stay on Highland Park. So that's what I'd like to do going forward into the future.
Counselor? Same question.
Great, thank you very much. Great question. I was happy to be part of the municipal council that approved the purchasing for Highland Park. We all had our different reasons on to why we did that. I think that right now, I think our largest problem with Highland Park is our ability to maintain it. We do have to try and figure out a way for a funding source, but I don't think selling the building is the appropriate way to do it. We'd have to incorporate easements around the facility for that, and it could kind of impede the true reason why we purchased Highland Park, which was to provide a area for people to enjoy that green space. But what we struggle with a little bit, though, is that I get phone calls a lot about the high grass and the ticks and the lack of maintenance over there, and I think we need to figure out a way in our budget to be able to properly staff the park department as well as provide them with the equipment. When we did purchase Highland Park, it tripled the size of the space that they're responsible for, and our inability to just be able to maintain that needs to be addressed. It would be something that I would plan for in a budget. Thank you.
Mayor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Very good. So with respect to selling off Highland Park, we've already had a surveyor come over, and we're looking at partitioning off the 3 acres of land, which would include the building itself and the parking lot, as well as some frontage leading over to Mechanic Street. So that's actually happening right now. With the easement, easements don't create a problem for this situation. To get the Park and Forestry staff around to the back of the building where they could use the garages. I mean, that's just that's a non-issue. An easement's a non-issue. I mean, they're all over the city, all over the country. With respect to the lack of maintenance, Capron Park is a perfectly manicured park, and the goal of Highland Park is to make it more of a natural park. So we don't want it to actually be perfectly manicured like Capron Park. That's the goal. So with respect to this staffing, I've actually already pledged to Derek Corsi that I'll hire another staff, as well as get a chip truck, which will be like having 2 or 3 other staff.
Counselor, 1 minute.
Thank you. I think the easiest way to actually drum up money, not specifically just for the city or Highland Park, it would be to actually install a solar farm in that location, down in the back portion behind where the clubhouse is. There would be a small initial investment that we would have to bond for, but it would repay itself back in very short order and would actually benefit not only the residents of the city of Attleboro, but the school department as well as the city by having those energy cost savings.
Fantastic. The next question will be asked by Tom Riley, and Counselor will be the first to answer. Tom?
We recently had a guest column in the Sun Chronicle who made the point that the city plans for tax relief for senior citizens were facing substantial increases because of the huge high school project are inadequate. They're a drop in the bucket, basically. Are there any plans to mitigate those burdens on senior citizens in particular?
Sure. So yes, as we discussed at the last debate, in my position as acting president, I did create a committee for senior tax abatement to specifically address this. I assigned 3 of my colleagues to that commission. They've been working very, very hard to kind of think out of the box and be able to address some of the more immediate needs of state law that's available and different plans that are available not only through the city but through the state. In addition to that, there's been discussion about creating a special fund for senior tax abatement where people could either make donations, or if we finish projects here in the city, any surplus from that could be swept into that account so that people would be able to apply for that. It is a very challenging topic. It's something that's really important to me. My parents are older, and everybody has to worry about them being able to stay in their homes, and that's a focus here. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort, and we are, the municipal council specifically is dedicated to finding those resolutions that are reasonable and responsible to the city.
Mayor, same question.
So there's 3 specific things, you could arguably say 4 specific things I've done to help make the tax hike on all Attleboro residents a lot easier, not just seniors, but all Attleboro residents. The first one is to stretch out the bond from 20 years to 30 years, and that's the payback amount. That's just like anybody else who has a 20-year versus 30-year mortgage. Now, I know my opponent is going to probably hop on that and say it added an extra $40 million to the cost of the project. I just saw her husband kind of wink at her when I said that. But that's quite all right, because it actually makes it more affordable when you stretch that out from 20 years to 30 years. I mean, something like over 90% of the mortgages in the country are a 30-year mortgage, including Councilor Kobus's 30-year mortgage. So the second thing is so the first thing was stretch out the length of the bond. The second thing is to sell off existing property, and the third thing is to sell off, to use existing tax revenues. Those are three specific things we've done to actually make the tax hike a lot more manageable. Now, I've already looked into the idea of having a different tax rate for seniors, but our state constitution actually prohibits us from doing that. There's other things that I'd like to do, but these things are things we'd have to do with collaboration with the council. For example, increase the number of people working on the senior tax abatement program, bringing that up to 150. So yeah, there's a lot of things that we can do. There's a lot of things I've already done. I think my opponent and I are both in agreement on this issue. We need to do something.
You have 1 minute to respond.
Thank you.
Counselor.
I absolutely will hop on the extending it by 10 years, added $47 million worth of interest to this project. The proposed savings by extending it out per taxpayer was $60 a year. So now we have to pay for it for 10 extra years. It wasn't a fiscally responsible thing to do. And it actually had the potential of sinking the school vote, because people were uncomfortable with that. And I think bringing up a fellow colleague's mortgage or anybody's mortgage in the middle of a debate is really, I'm just going to leave it at that. Thanks.
Mayor, you have 1 minute.
Heather, you voted for it. You voted for it. So, I mean, yeah, I did stretch that out from 20 years to 30 years. Steve Withers was in the room. Steve Withers Jr. was in the room. Jack Jacoby was in the room. The budget director was in the room. The auditor was in the room. The treasurer was in the room when I came up with that idea to stretch it out from 20 years to 30 years. And guess what? Not fiscally responsible, you voted for it. You voted yes.
The next question will be asked by Bill Gouveia, and the first to answer will be the mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Mayor. Nice to see you again. The other night in the debate, there was a lot of talk about the relationship between the council and the mayor. And Mayor, you described the situation as not unlike, similar communities. And I believe the quote was, 11 people who think they can run the city better than the one person who was elected to do it, unquote. To both of you. Is that an actual portrayal of the situation here? Is Attleboro's local government really that political and polarized, like the executive branch in Congress, or is that just campaign talk?
No, I don't think it's nearly as bad as we think it is at all. I'm going to name names. I am friends with and work very well with Laura Dolan, Ty Waterman, Rick Conti, who else? Diana Holmes. These are four specific counselors. I have a good relationship with the city council president, Mark Cooper. We meet every week right before the city council meeting, and I give him an update on what it is I'm working on. I rely on Mark to be the middle person between me and the council. I have a great relationship with Kate Jackson as well. I mean, so I would say that what happens almost every city council meeting is I send down a communication, and some city councilors, it's usually the same 2 or 3 who are siding with my opponent, and they have been for quite a long time, they kick me around, and then the newspaper comes back and reports, oh, look, Paul's fighting with the city council again, when I didn't say anything. As I said last time, I have basically only criticized the council publicly twice. And that was once when they didn't interview my nominee for water superintendent, and the other time when we had the boiler issue just recently. Do we have fights and disagreements behind closed doors? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we do. And that's, if you're agreeing with somebody all the time and you're not fighting for something all the time, you're making promises to 2 different groups of people that are sometimes competing against each other. I mean, that's the nature of the game. That's what happens in politics.
Counselor.
Thank you. The fact that the 12 of us are elected to run the city in equal branches of government, it's not only what our citizens expect and deserve, but it's basic democracy. And with your education as a former legislator, you should understand that. In 2016, during the school budget crisis, you told constituents that the collective wisdom of the 11 is greater than any one city mayor. And I'm curious about what changed about that. I will state that the municipal council works wonderfully together, regardless of if they support me in this current position. In my leadership role, I have always supported them, every single one of them. And I think that there's a level of civility that needs to take place. What I've found disappointing in the manner in which the mayor has interacted between us and the municipal council, when there's something that's of importance, whether it's an emergency measure or a bond, he doesn't come down and have those conversations because he doesn't have to, because he's not required to do those kinds of things. He doesn't encourage good communication between the municipal council and himself. I was brought up under the Dumas administration, and the communication, though heated at times, it was always there, and we don't have that here now. And that's what causes the disruption, that's what causes miscommunication, misinformation, and the general need to just say, no, I don't have to do what you're asking me to do, instead of working collaboratively. That's what has eroded the relationship between the administration and the municipal council.
Mayor, you have 1 minute.
I disagree. Actually, the city councilors who give me a hard time have been on your side all along. I mean, so as far as the communication goes, I meet with the city council president once a week, just like the previous mayor did. I post all the work I do on my public Facebook page for any city councilor to observe that and ask me questions about. And as far as your comment about running the city with 12 elected people, this is the part that you have repeatedly overstepped your bounds, in particular you, Councilor Preker. The city council is not there to run the city. You are there to legislate. You set the rules. The mayor is the one who runs the city. The mayor is the one who runs the government. The city council makes the rules, and then the mayor is the one who enforces those rules. That's the separation of powers. That's where it's co-equal. Over and over again, though, you particular and a couple of your colleagues have violated the city charter, and I can name numerous examples, which probably will come up tonight.
Counselor, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Peter. Quite simply, it's the lack of trust that we have in your ability to actually do a good job as an administrator for the city. That's what the problem is here. Anytime we've asked for information, you withhold it, you hold it over our heads. And that's the reason why we feel, and your overinflated sense of interference. And I love how you identified me as one of them, but with the boiler situation, with Highland Park, with a variety of things, I've sat there and I've kept quiet, and there are other people who have made those comments because they feel that you are untrustworthy and that you aren't doing your due diligence. And what is the problem really with sharing information? It's mind-blowing to me. Just because you don't have to doesn't mean that you can't.
Time for round 2. Mike Kirby will ask a question. The first to answer will be Councilor Perica.
Well, I'm not going to let this topic slide. Keeping on this topic, it seems to me as an outsider who doesn't live in this city, that some of this involves Republican councilors fighting a Democratic mayor. Respond to that. Tell me if there's any truth to that part of it.
There's absolutely no truth to that, Mike. Thank you. Thank you for that question. I appreciate that. There's absolutely no truth to that. When I sit in the seat that you're sitting in, I solely advocate for what's best for the residents of the city of Attleboro. As I have said before, I've seen some partisan politics creeping in, mostly from the administration, and that has had a small effect on the municipal council. But at the end of the day, we all work very hard to make sure that we do what's right and that democracy prevails here in the city. So I don't really think that, for me specifically, I don't feel that partisan politics really has anything to do with it. I very much have never shied away from the fact that I am fiscally conservative. I'm 100% socially progressive. It's actually kind of funny. Some of my colleagues on the council who are Democrats, I've had conversations with them, and they tell me that I'm more liberal than they are. So for me, it isn't something, for me personally, it isn't something that actually affects the way that I do the job. Thank you.
Mayor, same question.
Yeah, thank you. Before we go back, the lack of trust in the information, there has never been any information I've withheld from a city council member, ever. I look forward to seeing your rebuttal on that. But is the issue of partisan politics entering city level, City elections are supposed to be nonpartisan, and the work of an administration is supposed to serve everybody that's in the city. This actually, a very similar question was asked in the last debate, and I told you how, if you look at my campaign literature, you can't tell if I'm a Democrat or Republican. You look at what I post on my Facebook every day, you can't tell if I'm a Democrat or Republican. If you look at the people that I help out, you can't tell if I'm favoring Democrats or Republicans. Last debate, I talked about how we had somebody who blasted me, like barked me off his driveway because I was a Democrat, and this is back in 2012, and a few months ago I helped him out. But this, sometimes we have Democrats agreeing with me on some issues, sometimes you have Democrats disagreeing, sometimes Republicans agree, sometimes they disagree. At the city level, I agree with my opponent, it is largely nonpartisan.
Counselor, you have 1 minute to respond.
I think I said all I needed to say. Thanks.
Mayor,
I agree, yeah, I think we're in agreement on this issue.
we might be able to catch some of the World Series. Tom Riley will ask the next question. The mayor will have 90 seconds to respond.
25 years ago, when I joined the Sun Chronicle, Paul Rickson, our publisher, sat me down to interview me, and one of the topics he brought up was the downtown. It's just not viable. This has been a will-o'-the-wisp for at least 3 administrations. Revitalization of downtown has been a byword. It's never really come to fruition. What's different this time around? And are we looking at another 25 years of disappointment and a derelict downtown?
2 things are different. I bring a different approach to the job than my predecessor. And the predecessor before that, one a Republican, one a Democrat, and I've hired an economic development director at a critical time. We have a lot of good things going on downtown. I've said before, the Union Street District is a project that I started in basically May of 2018, and I'm looking forward to talking more about the details of that. But that is something we are my approach to downtown revitalization is to actually use tools that we have not previously used. HDIP, TIF, DIF, PACE, using CDBG money. These are things that have not been used. CDBG money has been used a little bit in the past, as has TIF, but these other things are used to incentivize buyers and developers into doing, coming here. If we don't use these things, they're just going to go bring their money somewhere else. So we have a new toolkit. We have an economic development director that recruited from Washington. 40 people applied for that job. So we've had numerous news stories in the past few days about what's going on in the downtown area. This is because of the work that we're doing. I give the direction to my economic development director, Catherine. I lay out the priorities and what areas I want her to focus on, and then with her experience, she goes and she does these things. So it's a different climate, just a different way of doing things. The state has realized there's a need for more economic development, so they chip in more programs. A lot of things are different.
Counselor, downtown.
Downtown. So with a Parikh administration, you get the best of both worlds. You get someone who has the ability to create great, good, long-lasting work relationships with developers and with our city departments that are helpful for that. Now, I remember when my husband and I moved here 20 years ago, there were promises made. It's time to come through on those promises. There isn't anything that the mayor can bring or is bringing currently to the city that I can't do or do better, because I bring that next level of being able to create those relationships and be able to foster even more relationships outside of the city, to bring them here and not necessarily have to give TIFs and use CDBG money to just make a deal come together so that they can purchase it. Again, the Union Street block, I'm looking forward to that too, but they won't get a shovel in the ground until 2023. And that's provided that that they can get permitting up through Boston. My relationship, with the endorsement from the governor, we can move forward with a great relationship and be able to help and work with our developers to steamroll that path and to clear it and make it better so that developers here have an easier, streamlined process.
Mayor, you have 1 minute.
My opponent says that she can do better, but on 6 years on the council, she hasn't done anything on this issue about fostering development and increasing relationships between the city and developers. You don't need to be the mayor to create these relationships and bring people here. I would also challenge you to name the owners of the Union Street District, name the owner of the Bronson building, the Briggs building, name the owner of all the, the buildings downtown. I mean, you talk about getting things done in the city, you're talking about putting the Sun Chronicle, revitalizing that. It's not for sale. It's not for sale. And your response to that was everybody has a price. No, not necessarily true. The current owner, a guy named Bob Jones, he owns the Union Street District. He only wanted to buy a portion of the Kidstown property. It was because I offered him the CDBG money that he said, okay, I'll buy the rest of the block. Otherwise, it would still be Jim Glassman who owns that.
Counselor, you have 1 minute.
This is the second time you brought up the, in 6 years I haven't brought this forward to you or done anything about that. That's completely false because I've done everything as 1/11 of the municipal council to change the zoning to accommodate the TOD or any other kind of building or the New England Sports Village. In addition to that, it should be discussed, changing the zoning of the Union Street to accommodate the TODs to move things along faster. And also, if I was to bring that information to you, I'm fully well aware, one, you wouldn't listen to me, two, you'd just tell me to stay in my lane.
The next question will be asked by Bill Gouveia. The first to answer will be Counselor Perica. Bill?
Thanks, Peter. Let's talk for just a bit in general about funding for education. A lot has been made of the fact that there's been no layoffs in the school department for the last couple of years. But is that really the standard that Attleboro wants to go by? Nobody got laid off? There's a difference between adequately funded and properly funded. Do you believe the school budget is properly funded right now to support a strong level of quality of education? And if not, how do you propose to focus on achieving or maintaining that?
Thank you for this question. No, I don't. And it's been one of the cores of my arguments through my tenure as a city councilor to advocate for more funding for the schools. The passage to so this particular budget, it is our percent over net school spending has been reduced over the course of the last 2 years in comparison to what Mayor Dumas has been able to do. The suggested cuts to the school budget this year was $300,000 in special education, attacking our most vulnerable residents and students. No, layoffs isn't it. We're gutting the budget to make sure that we're not having those layoffs. That's not the standard that the city of Attleboro should be going by. In addition to that, for the fiscal 2020 budget, in 2019, the school department, in an effort to compensate for increased costs in special education, they froze several line items, and because of that, when they came in to review the school budget, those things the mayor and the administration said, "Oh, well, you didn't spend those, so you don't need those anymore," and swept them. We cannot rely. The only reason why we're going to possibly be okay in our education budget this year is because the state came in and added extra funding of over $540,000 to kind of balance that out. Thank you.
Mayor, school funding.
Right, so this is something that I have done a lot of work on with the budget director. No city department is adequately funded. No city department is adequately staffed. No city department has the full equipment that they need. It's just the reality of it. We treated this school department, when Barry and I did the budget, we treated the school department like every other city department. And is it adequately funded? No, but no city department is. The idea was to make sure that there were no layoffs as a minimum standard to every city department, no layoffs in any city department, and we were able to achieve that. We created a special education stabilization fund at $200,000. We also, and that's something we're going to take from the free cash to fund that, and I plan to add to that each year. That's one thing. We are also working on fixing the roofs at Brennan and Wamsutta that have been leaking for 20 years. We're looking at fixing the floors at Hill Robertson, Hyman Fine, which are in need of repair. That's a safety issue for the kids. Those are well overdue as well. The parking lots at Thatcher and Hyman Fine as well. So there's almost, the school department's about half the city budget, but we're with the capital plans that we have, that we're already talking, the treasurer, the budget director, the auditor, we're already working on plans for 2021 or FY20 and then going into 2021. So there's a lot that we're doing for the schools, but the bare minimum No, I think the councilor and I are in agreement that, not enough money is going to any department.
Counselor, you have 1 minute if you wish.
Thank you very much. The only reasons that the project that the mayor is discussing this evening are happening is because the school committee came up with a funding mechanism for $4.5 million to take care of some of the other larger problems that they've been facing. So then what happened is that the roofs and the floors have kind of moved to the top of the pile. As it pertains to the roofs, like we've been working on that for more than, they have been leaking for 20 years. Over the course of the last 6 years, we've applied to the state for funding and grant money to be able to fix those. That was denied. I'm really concerned about the gym floors. We don't have an accurate idea of what that's going to cost. And so the appropriation that he sent out is suspect on that.
Mayor, you have 1 minute.
So to rebut some of the things that Councilor Parika said in her last two statements on this issue, the school finance director, Mark Furtado, came to me and Barry and said we were actually be able to have performance contracts as a way to fund some of these other capital needs, and that's true. So giving credit where it's due, Mark Furtado came up with that idea, and then we were able to move some other projects up higher. As far as applying to the state, that's something that's been going on, but Dave Sawyer and I finally had a face-to-face and said, Dave, we were in agreement, it's time to actually fix these roofs. With respect to the percent over net school spending, mathematically it's impossible to keep up with 3% over net school spending going forward. The city doesn't make enough in revenues, so that's actually sort of a false use of the percent over net school spending. As far as the suggested cuts go, everything I did with the school budget, with the budget director, I did with Mark Furtado, the finance director, as well as Dave Sawyer. Everything they agreed to.
The final round of questions from the panelists will begin with Mike Kirby, and the mayor will be first to answer.
I'd like to talk about taxes. I know we talk about schools and downtown, but I think that's the thing that most citizens care about, is how much they're going to be paying in taxes. And each year there's a tax classification vote. Which way would the split go under your administrations? Would it go more towards businesses? Would the type business be paying more, or would homeowners be paying more? Because each year it can go back and forth.
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. Under my administration, the mayor actually is not the one who determines the tax split. It's the assessor comes in and gives a recommendation or gives information, and then the city council and their deliberations come up with a split, and then they send it up to the mayor, and the mayor either approves it or vetoes it. And what I would like to see, though, is the homeowner being favored. Taunton has a tax rate that's close to, it's like 1.7. We're down around 1.3. So, other similar municipal cities, their tax rates are actually much higher. The tax rate a business pays is only one variable. It's just one variable in many variables that contribute to whether or not a community is going to be successful with its business base. So the high school tax hike, what people are going to be paying, the biggest hit of that is going to be happening over the next few years. And so it's really important that we actually don't add more burden to the taxpayers, the residents. Unfortunately, last year and many other years, my opponent actually voted on the side of the businesses, which consequently would have pushed the tax rate higher on the homeowners. That was her vote. That's happened numerous times. I think that there's more things that we can do for businesses than just worry about the tax rate, especially when surrounding cities have a higher tax rate.
Counselor.
Thank you. So we did actually just have the municipal council just had our presentation from Julie, our new director, and our community is actually capped at a shift of 1.5. So we can't go any higher than that, specifically for this year. And so one of the things that has been one of my most challenging as a municipal councilor is the tax rate and how to set that and how to create an equal and kind balance. Last year, I did suggest a more modest shift. I didn't support what was suggested at the time, and then there were other amendments made on the floor. I suggested something more modest, so it's more fair and equitable to both businesses and residents, and that was I was outvoted on that one, so that's 100% correct. Regardless of what the tax rate is, the homeowners carry the burden of creating the levy for the city of Attleboro, regardless of what the shift is. That is the biggest piece of the pie. That's where we draw all of our money from the levy. And I'm looking forward to having the conversation on the council floor within the next couple of weeks regarding the shift.
Mayor, you have 1 minute.
I'm very happy to hear that the councilwoman, she admitted that she voted against the homeowners. I mean, that's what she did. She voted. She was suggesting amendments that would have hurt homeowners. That's the reality. So I commend you for being honest about that.
Counselor, you have 1 minute if you'd like.
Well, one of us has to be. So, again, it wasn't a matter of voting pro-homeowner or against the homeowners. It's about what's fair and just and democratic for our community and what keeps businesses here in business. Increases between the fees that they have to pay, increases in tax, and constantly going back to that very small well does not actually bolster business here in our community. So listen, I'm a homeowner here. I have to face those increases and challenges as well. And so any decision that I make on the municipal council floor is always, I try to make it fair and equitable to everyone here in the city.
The next question will be asked by Tom Riley, and the counselor will be first to answer.
One of the more contentious issues over the last year or so has been the water superintendent for the city of Attleboro. If I understand this correctly, why did you initially refuse to interview the nominee for water superintendent before voting against her?
Thank you for this question. I'm happy to provide some additional clarification on this. So I know it's painted that I refused to interview her or whatever. Again, it was a matter of staying in my lane. That's not actually part of the job of the municipal council. In addition to that, any commentary that was requested on the council floor as to why we didn't want her in that position, we were collectively, as an 11, were advised by our the city solicitor to be exercise caution with regards to making any negative commentary about a personnel issue. I did meet with Courtney and the mayor and Barry Lacasse, along with President Cooper. We were in a meeting for quite some time, and they were urging that Courtney qualified over the four corners of her resume. My biggest concern was her ability to handle personnel issues. The reason why my vote switched in the affirmative to her for her appointment, I was told and I was promised that Courtney would go and take some personnel courses and help bolster that lacking portion of her resume. She took one, and it was a 4-hour course. Since that time, we've had water issues. We have the largest number of grievances, and in addition to that, we also have members of that department leaving in droves. I think that my initial response to that would have been correct.
Mayor.
This isn't really a question that I can answer directly. It's more of a rebuttal because I wasn't the one who voted for it. I put forward the water superintendent's name. The council did not even interview her. They didn't even interview her. In fact, my opponent actually bragged on June 27, 2018, that they are going on recess for the next 3 weeks. They went on vacation for 3 weeks, leaving her suspended in abeyance, wondering what is going to happen. When I say suspended, I don't mean disciplinary, just kind of wondering what's going to happen. It is the job of the municipal council to interview the water superintendent or anybody in front of the city council. That is absolutely the job. And this is a person who is acting department head, which any city councilor can go and talk to. In fact, I encourage them to talk to department heads. That's the right course of action. Talking to line staff, that's a different issue. So the council is right, Councilor Preaker is right, that we did have a 90-minute meeting with the water superintendent and Mark Cooper, Barry Lacasse, myself, her, and in that meeting, it's really telling that the counselor voted against her without, never even talked to her about her candidacy. It was also interesting in that meeting that my opponent said that this chain of command thing is something I have to get over. This chain of command. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was said in that meeting. I wonder if you remember that.
You have 1 minute to respond, Counselor.
So in my 6 years of experience on the municipal council and working with the various department heads, I think that I have some skills in identifying who would be progressive and protective of her employees or someone who would not be. Again, where it was a circumstance where there was not particularly a whole bunch of support for this potential candidate, dragging her through the mud on the council floor isn't an activity that I'm particularly fond of. You praise in public, criticize in private, and so that's what ended up happening. And again, the mayor gave his word that he would send her to training in the area where she lacks, and has proven repeatedly that she lacks in that part of her resume. He followed through with one training, that was it, and things haven't gotten better.
Mayor, you have 1 minute.
Excellent. So my opponent talks about the morale in the atmosphere with the employees at the water department, but the water department employees showed up here to support Courtney, the water superintendent. In fact, I believe that you actually called the police to escort you into the building because you were concerned about your own safety. So that was something that happened as well. As far as the grievances go, there's grievances in every city department. We take whenever we deal with a grievance, the department head takes it on and starts working with personnel. If it's a challenging issue, we bring in our labor attorney. Under my administration, we have basically not lost any grievances that I know of, and we also have not lost any lawsuits. Some things have even been dismissed as frivolous. So, things are actually not nearly as doom and gloom as they're made out to be. It's not like that at all.
The final question from the Park Street side of the room will be asked by Bill Gouveia. The first to answer will be the mayor.
Yeah, I'd like to end the panelist part of it by being a little lighter. A few debates ago, I asked a question that Peter liked a lot. So in honor of Peter, I decided to re-ask this question to you folks. We've learned a lot about you, but tell us something about yourself that most voters probably don't know, but they probably should.
Mayor.
Most voters don't know. I don't know. I put everything out there on my Facebook page. All I do is work. I don't have a family. I don't even have a dog anymore. I'm getting a new dog on November 24th. I used to own a business here in Attleboro. After I graduated high school, I opened up a martial arts studio right above the Park Street Ale and Brew House. I'm a full instructor in Jeet Kune Do and Filipino Kali. I started training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu well before the first UFC ever even happened. I used to stick fight and knife fight professionally when I was in college. So, that's something that I taught at my studio between 1995, December 95, and then 2009 when I finally sold the Ashley building for my mother. I would go out to college, come back. I would, have private lessons. That's pretty much all I did. But when I was out in California, I would also teach out there as well. I've got about 20 professional fights under me. But that's something I don't ever talk about, and it's nothing that you have to really look hard to find that about me. But yeah, I was trained in martial arts from the time I was probably about 12 or 13 years old, and got certified as an instructor when I was 18 years old, and opened up a studio when I was 19 years old.
So I know not to get into a fight with the mayor. What do I need to know about you?
That you need to come over my house so I can feed you. That's one of the things. So I live a pretty public life, but one of the ways that, and I'm sure that most people know anyway, but my love language is food. Cook for those who bring you happiness, and always share those kinds of things. So that's one of my stress relief. People will know that if I'm having a hard time, like on the council floor or someplace else, that I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning making banana muffins for the kids before they go to school. They kind of like that, and what I do, and that's part of just the showing gratitude to others and to other individuals, and it's just kind of a fundamental thing that I learned growing up in Norwood and being part of the family, that there's always room at the table, there's always food around, and that's part of a great celebration. So that's kind of, I'm sure there are lots of people that know that about me already, but I would have to say that would be part of it. And if you're looking for a career path, I did go to school, and I was taking classes to become a librarian, because that truly was what my passion was at the time, but ended up getting married and having babies, and that kind of got put on the back burner. So
You'll have to bring some of the food to Skyrocks.
happy
Mayor,
to do it.
you have a minute if you'd like. You don't have to.
No, I don't think so. I can
Counselor, you have a minute if you'd like.
I don't want to actually get into a knife fight. I've seen the video on YouTube, so I don't need to get
There is
into a
a
knife
video
fight
on
with you.
YouTube. If you type in my name, Paul Harrow knife fighting, you'll find it. Two-minute fights. It's out there.
Time for the next portion of our debate, always the favorite portion, at least as far as I'm concerned. The candidates ask the questions of each other, and the way this will work, candidate B, which is the mayor, will ask a question of candidate A, the counselor. The mayor will then get 1 minute to respond, and then they will each get a minute each to respond back to each other's answers. The first question will be asked by Mayor Harrow, addressed to Councilor Parika.
They're good.
God
God
bless
bless
you. Hold on a second. Excuse me, thank you.
So, Councilor Perico, will you take the advice of your department heads?
Oh, absolutely. Everybody deserves an opinion and deserves their opinion to be heard. The department heads are, as you like to say, experts in their field. But there are some areas where I think that depending on what the goal is, and depending what the end result is, depending on what the budget is, we all have to sit down at the table and have a collective discussion over what the best practice could be. I most certainly, in my interactions with department heads, I very much value their opinion, and when we talk about what our specific goals are, they kind of cater their answers to what the need is. And so, of course, I can't wait to hear the second part of this question because I know there's a zinger coming.
Well, it's not really a zinger. It's just, I've observed over the past year and a half or so that you have disregarded the advice of numerous department heads. For example, or their expertise. You said that you're going to improve snow removal operations if you're a mayor. You infuriated folks over at DPW. With respect to the cooling station, you disagreed with the fire chief and the assistant fire chief. With respect to the police chief, you disagreed with him on his recommendation for speed humps. With Highland Park, you were looking for some type of problem with the presentation of Doug Healy from ES&M, and I've also been told that you were, I don't know if this is true or not, but you were going to challenge the findings of that. With the ARA and the transit-oriented development, you basically said to the chairman of the ARA, who's been on the ARA for 10 years, that you're operating too slow, and you'll do things faster when you have absolutely no jurisdiction to do things any faster. With the downtown and the economic development director, you haven't worked with her. You stood in her office once, but you didn't talk about economic development.
Mayor, you're out of time. Counselor, you have a minute to respond, and then you'll get another minute.
Thank you so much. So it's interesting. So just, I guess, saying that I have a difference of opinion gives the impression that I don't want to work with somebody. It doesn't mean that we can't kind of come to the same table. It's, as it pertains to pot shops, I absolutely took the recommendation of the police chief with regards to the location of that. You were the one who blocked him from actually being able to have open dialogue with regards to that. The cooling station, it was the right thing to do. It was a private circumstance in a private location, and what I do on my private time is up to me. And I absolutely have no concerns whatsoever about my ability to have good working relationships with our department heads.
Mayor, you have 1 minute.
With respect to the police chief, it's actually against the law for me to prevent the police chief from saying anything. I mean, it's actually, and I didn't. I mean, so that was a really lousy article that the Providence Journal had written, and I had, that was, with respect to the cooling station, you were acting in your capacity as a city council member, and that basically ran afoul with the fire chief. But let me continue on with my list. With the animal control officer, in the intervention on George Street, you were at odds with him and you didn't go to him for that issue. With Kathy and Allison in my office on communications and then, the content of those communications, you disagree with them on that. The people of Beagle Club Road, you clash with them. It's like one thing after another. I worry that a Parika administration would micromanage and disregard the advice of the subject matter experts, because I just read off a list of stuff over and over and over again. You have done that, and it has really, really upset these department heads.
Counselor, it's your turn to ask a question of the mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gay. During your term in office, You've attempted to violate and twist the charter of the city on multiple occasions for transactional political wins. You tried to change the charter without the required charter review process. You've tried to veto a non-negative vote for your water superintendent, which caused the council to fight the original ruling via the Attorney General. Ultimately, the solicitor reversed her ruling, but the damage had been done. It seems every other email from you claims the council is violating or twisting your view of the charter and interfering with the administration. It has come to the point where many of the council feel that we need our own legal representation because the trust in your administration has eroded, and you use the solicitor for your political agenda and not that of the city. Do you feel the council should have its own solicitor?
No, I don't, because do we have 2 police chiefs? Do we have 2 fire chiefs? No, we don't. And as far, what was the first thing you said that the first example of the violating the charter?
So you twist the charter on multiple occasions. With you tried to change the charter without the charter
term
review
limits.
process.
No, the term limits, yeah. So that's actually something that we've had multiple city solicitors rule that I'm right and the council is wrong on that. And I'm right because I'm listening to them. There are 2 means to change the city charter. One of them is a charter commission, and the other way to change the city charter is through a special act. When I was on the municipality committee for 4 years at the State House, and 3 years, 2 terms, but 3 years, we do it all the time that way, through a special act. That's one way to do it. The other way is through a charter commission. There's 2 city solicitors have ruled on that. As far as vetoing a non-negative, that was also under the advice of the city solicitor. I took the city solicitor's advice, and she said, yes, you can veto this. She later came back and said, no, you can't veto that, and that was a big mess. But in both of these examples, I followed the advice of the city solicitor. The city solicitor is basically a department head. It's the head of the legal department, if you will. We don't have 2 heads of every department. We have just one, and the city council, you vote on whether or not my nominee for the solicitor is going to pass. So if you don't like that nominee, vote against her.
You have 1 minute to respond.
I enjoyed that all of your words just kind of redirected and blamed the city solicitor for that. What the true fact of the matter is that at every turn you tried to circumvent the will of the voters. Yes, you have the ability to do those kinds of things, but if we're going to convene a charter commission, and that's what you promised through 2000, everywhere you went while you were campaigning in 2017, you promised a charter commission. You didn't do that because once you found out that it would be something that they could review everything, you may not have wanted to give up that piece of control. By trying to change the charter, you circumvented the will of the people. And so if I can take just a second, my veto policy would be that I would like to restore the respect between the legislative and executive branches. I'll never veto or threaten to veto, which you've done multiple times, a measure voted on and approved by the municipal council, except under and if there's new information that was received, or if for some reason the measure was deemed illegal. Simply stated, I'll never veto or threaten to veto a measure simply because I disagree with it, which is exactly what you've done during your administration.
Mayor, 1 minute.
The city charter gives me that right to veto. I don't know why you would want to suggest that I shouldn't exercise that right. And as far as getting the input from the people, when I was knocking on doors in 2017, I would say over 90% of the people, and that was the first thing I led with too, is the term limit issue. That was the first thing I would talk to people about, and in 90%, I would say over 90% of the people supported me on that. It was almost a mandate. See, the use of a charter commission is to do a comprehensive review of the charter. A special act is to do a surgical cut to it or addition to it. So both of those they're different tools for different purposes. I felt like by leading with that comment, about the term limits at the door and having 90% of the people say, yeah, I support that, that is a mandate. And so the charter commission was not the right tool for that. A special act was.
And Councilor, you have the final minute on this topic.
So if you're, in your opinion, you think it's a mandate from the select people that you spoke to while you were knocking on doors, let them exercise their will. Let them exercise their choice and let them be able to vote on it instead of taking that responsibility on. And there is a percentage of the people, even though you knock on virtually every door in the city of Attleboro, you don't talk to every single one of them. And there are people who felt during that period of time that it was important for them to be able to exercise that vote. We don't come out here and tell the people what they want. They get to do that for themselves.
Mayor, you will ask the next question.
Next question. So, Councilor Parika, how are you going to fund education differently than I have?
You have 90 seconds.
Thank you very much. I think reestablishing the relationship with the school committee and not trying to, during your term, you also tried to circumvent the voters by going in and taking over the school committee because you didn't think that they were doing a good job. And you repeatedly have said that they don't know how to manage their money. There's a relationship breakdown between the administration currently and the school committee. The school committee also, again, voted by the voters of the city of Attleboro to go in and advocate for their needs and wants. I think being able to do that would be great. I wouldn't, there's been a lot of wishes and hopes that the state would change up some of their funding, which they did, and that's kind of what came in and saved your proposed budget this year. And I think that creating that working relationship, having a better working relationship with Boston, and having state representatives that are willing to be up there working for this community to help change that calculation, those are the things that are important. Again, downtown revitalization, being able to increase the piece of the pie, all of those things, they help with every area of budgeting, not just with the schools, but across the city.
Mayor.
So I hope everybody heard what I just heard, which is that she did not say how she was going to do anything different. And in fact, in the two budgets that I proposed in the year 2018 and the year 2019, the councilor didn't offer any amendments to the budget on the education spending. So, and then she voted for what I sent down. With respect to taking over the school committee, what I had suggested was the mayor should be the chair of the school committee. That's not taking over the school committee. That's making the mayor consistent with 60% of other cities in the state, as well as every other city in Bristol County, because the mayor is actually the chair of the school committee in every other city county. There, a lot of school committee members didn't like that and have not forgiven me for even making that suggestion. As far as the state saving my proposed budget that you voted for, remind you, we had already talked to Dave Sawyer about that, and we had a plan if the state didn't come in with that money, plan B, exactly how we were going to deal with that.
Counselor, 1 minute.
Thank you. Both of your budgets have contributed less over net school spending minimum than either of the last two Dumas budgets. You have had the perfect opportunity to bridge the educational needs to the educational costs. However, you let the state increase in Chapter 70 funds bail you out. There are cuts that you suggested to the line item that are contractually obligated and have expenses, and you even cut the legal fee line item during a contract year when those costs are the highest. The fact is that as a state representative, you chose party relationships over trying to advocate for more school funding for Attleboro. And this year, when the state formula was finally changed and we got more money, the money could not be used to prevent the cuts you proposed, rather than were used to prevent the cuts you proposed rather than expanding services to our students in need and what they deserve.
Oh my gosh,
Mayor, you have the final minute.
Okay, I have a hard time keeping up with her reading from notes. This isn't really a debate if you're going to have a pre-scripted answer to everything, but
It's called preparation.
it's not genuine. So with respect to the legal costs, we basically funded the school department at the level of legal funding that they had over the last several years, and Dave Sawyer agreed to that, and Dave Sawyer agreed to come to me and ask for more money if he needs it. That was the agreement I had with the school superintendent and the finance director. With respect to the cuts to line items that were contractual, if the departments, like the different school principals, were not taking advantage of something that was contractual, we did remove that from the budget because they weren't spending it. And once again, I told Dave Sawyer, if you need this money, come back and ask for it. We treated the school department like every other city department, and that has never been done. We treated them like every other city department. So that, the net school spending issue also, you got to understand the math about that. You're wrong about
Mayor,
that.
you're out of time. The next question will be asked by the councilor.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. So I'm going to read. Is that okay? You often talk about how you like to help those at the lower end of the economic spectrum. Yet you've asked the City Council to sell the Richardson School, which provides a home for several agencies to provide vital services to the most vulnerable citizens in our city. Your reasoning was that they're not self-sufficient and cost the city approximately $30,000 a year. The proposal to sell the Richardson School has met stiff opposition. Would you like to now reconsider the suggestion?
Well, my suggestion was revised, and it was in the newspaper. I would have hoped you would have seen that we sell the Richardson School to a nonprofit. Because it's the nonprofits who are saying that there are ways to go ahead and fund the excessive costs of the Richardson School. If we're spending money on the Richardson School, we're not spending money on different departments. And that's our shared primary responsibility are the departments that we're tasked with. These nonprofits operate in other municipalities, and they have a business model that actually is able to sustain themselves. Now, I've worked with these nonprofits. I gave a $1,000 donation to the St. Vincent de Paul Society. And so I've given money to them, I've donated to them. I recognize the work they do. As a state rep, I would often refer people to them. I've personally driven people to a homeless shelter in the past. I mean, I've done this, I know the value of the nonprofits. We just found out that the biggest rent payer at the Richardson School is likely to leave in the next 2 months. And what that means, for us to be able to keep the Richardson School open, providing these important services, and they are important services, nobody disputes that, but the money is being taken away from other departments. But now what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to actually have to start sending the council requests to use free cash to keep that building open. I'll give it away for free.
Counselor.
You can't give it away for free. You can't do it for $1 either without not without the vote of the municipal council. That's part of that's law here in the city. And I find it interesting that you brag about driving someone to a homeless shelter when one of my colleagues drove someone who was in distress, and that caused to the hospital, and that caused a big hullabaloo. What I struggle with is that we could sell it to a nonprofit should the municipal council approve the disposition of it, but it doesn't make the problem go away. And the reason why some of the individuals or the organizations in there are contemplating leaving is because they're held in limbo right now. Are they selling the building? Are they not selling the building? We have people that we need to take care of, and there needs to be a continuity of services. What you have done by sending that down to be for that disposition has disrupted the apple cart for so many people, and it wasn't the right thing to do.
Mayor, 1 minute.
Mayor Robbins, Mayor Dumas, and now me have all suggested that we sell the building because it is a money pit. It's taking money away from other city departments. That's my primary responsibility. If there was a way for us to sell it for $1, and there is a way to sell it for $1 to a nonprofit through the city council, you're right about that. I do have to do that with the city council, and that's what I've asked for authorization to do. If there was a way to do that, I'd like to do that. And I think that on this issue, we shouldn't be battling each other. This is a perfect example of how when I proposed something to the council shot it down. I came back with a revised version of how to address the issue. Let's sell it to a nonprofit. We can sell it for $1 by creating an RFP that basically identifies the type of buyer we want to sell it to. It kind of carves that out, and then we would only have so many people apply for that. Or, I'm throwing out something new. Let's sell it to a very large corporation who wants to use the money that they're spending on it as a tax write-off. Let's try that. Anything.
Counselor, you have the last minute.
You don't have a plan. There's no plan to provide those much needed services. This is a conversation. You are incredibly reactionary. The building needs $250,000 over the course of the next 5 years of improvements, and your knee-jerk response was, "Let's just sell it and get rid of it." We have to go at things in this community from a place where there's kindness and compassion, and not being reactionary and being proactive. The conversation needed to take place with the residents, the people who rent space there, and with the board and with the municipal council to figure out a best practice and best plan. Under my administration, I won't be selling the Richardson School, and would find a way to put a line item in the budget to be able to provide for it. It is a city property, no different than the library, no different than the firehouse, no different than any other thing. It is our responsibility to care for that, and I pledge to do that.
We are down to our final two questions. The first will be asked by the mayor.
Very good. I find it very interesting to say I don't have a plan for the Richardson School when you don't have a plan for downtown, and that brings me to my next question. Pretty pictures and wishful thinking is not a plan, and I know people is not a plan. You know people. Okay, very good. Can you name for me the owners of the Union Street buildings, the Fishnet building, the Bronson building, the Bates building, 54 Union Street? Who are the owners?
Very briefly, why do I have to? You already did it. Thanks.
Mayor, you have a minute to respond.
Thank you. So you don't know who these owners are. The Fishnet owner, the owner of the Fishnet building is Lisa Canada. Okay, Peter Manicus owns 54 Union Street. He was on the paper yesterday. Bob Jones now owns the Union Street district. Brian Hodis owns the Bronson building. Mr. Patel owns the Bates building across the street. You don't know these people. You haven't had conversations with these people. These developers you're talking about, they don't know. I mean, these millionaires or billionaires, you don't get to become a millionaire or a billionaire and invest all this money when you just say, oh, everybody has their price, and I'm just going to throw out money as a way to buy a building. I mean, these so-called developers who you won't tell us any of their names, they don't know if there's asbestos issues. They don't know if there's environmental remediation. They don't even know if the buildings are up for sale. They don't know anything about these buildings. You don't know the owners. That's not a plan.
Counselor, you have 1 minute.
So the things that are happening in this community are happening despite him, not because of the mayor. And he can name drop all he wants, and that's fine. And when I give a pledge to someone that I will protect their identity and the conversations that we're having, then I follow through with that. Because when I am successful and become the next mayor of the city of Attleboro, I need to start those relationships off in a foundation of trust. And there isn't anything, again, that you can do here with any of those people that you just named that I couldn't do equally as well, with the added capacity of being able to create long-standing working relationships. Anyone who's worked with you, it's not uncommon and not unknown that in very short order you burn bridges, and you're very challenging to work with. And I know that that's something that I would be able to bring to the table, and I would be able to sustain those relationships.
Mayor, you have the final minute.
Once again, Council Parika did not offer any specifics about anything. She says that she can't. She'll do things that I can't do. Okay, or there's nothing I can do. Where you disregard the economic incentives, PACE, HDIP, DIF, TIF, CDBG, as a way to actually get these developers here. That's how we did it. In May of 2018, I've said this over and over again, and for some reason you're not hearing it, Bob Jones's lawyer, he came to me, and he basically said, I'd like to buy a portion of the Kidstown parking lot. And I said, why don't you buy the rest of the rest of the block? I'll make it worth your while. Okay, when I offered up CDBG money, something that you would have disagreed with, it was only because I offered that he bought the rest of the block, and Jim Glassman is no longer here. It's because of the decisions I've done. That's why these things are happening. It's because I've tasked Catherine with very specific projects. These things are happening.
Final question by the counselor.
Thank you very much. So I've spoken to many people, and they feel that your handling of the gas leak on Torrey Street is reason enough for them not to vote for you. Please address our concerns on how you intimidated city workers into silence, how your transactional leadership and the caustic work environment you've created puts employees and families in the city in real danger.
I haven't intimidated anybody. I don't even know what you're talking about with that. I've actually encouraged Courtney to come down here with her staff and present before the city council. When the Torrey Street gas leak happened, the fire chief notified me of that. He said it was this was back in April. He said it was a routine gas leak. Columbia Gas was called in. They patched it up. End of story. Months later, a city employee said, "Wait a minute. There was a we were doing work right nearby where there was a gas leak, but those are two different holes. There were two different holes where Columbia Gas fixed their gas leak was a different hole. It was 10 feet away from where the water department. So there was no relationship between what the work the water department did with what happened with the Columbia Gas. I spoke with Columbia Gas. Do you know the name of the government liaison? Probably not. His name is Michael Kane. So again, I've spoken with him. You haven't. And Mike Kane actually said, Paul, you know, we replaced, you know, some of the gas work that was under there. You know, the gas infrastructure that was under there, and you know, it was corroded. I mean, something like 4%, between 4 and 5% of the mains throughout the city are corroded, and this legislature actually has given Columbia Gas 20 years to replace those corroded gas lines. So I spoke with Columbia Gas, I spoke with the fire chief, I was happy with what they gave me.
Counselor, 1 minute.
It's funny, you didn't want to do an investigation, but until you started hearing things that you didn't like, you chose to do so. In addition to that, through the council's investigation, Columbia Gas specifically stated that if that pipe was corroded, the fix would have been different. I appreciate the fact that you stick with that story and never deviate from it, but the facts are different than what you're saying. So you refused to investigate, and when the council took up the task, you started to hear things you didn't like. So you interfered, you threw out roadblocks, you refused to show up in front of the council to support your superintendent. You made up responses that simply didn't match the results of questionings. And the kid that was in the hole that kept saying he smelled gas after the excavator ripped the gas line from the ground, he was run out of town because of your campaign to tarnish his reputation, and you simply don't even care. I don't have that capacity. I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and your cover-up of this situation and what you did to that employee that trusted you as a leader disgusts me personally. When you tried to lay down the law with me and tell me to stay in my lane, this was the topic. This was the topic of the voicemail.
You're out of time, Counselor. Mayor, 1 minute to respond.
If I was going to be so harsh to that kid in the hole, he's the stepson of my secretary in my office.
That's why it's so surprising.
Okay, so, and that hasn't caused any problem. I mean, your characterization of running him out is absolutely false. He was actually, if there was a real bad gas leak, other people who were there at that gas leak reported back to me he was smoking a cigarette in the hole. If he was so concerned about it, why did other people report back to me he was smoking a cigarette? Because it wasn't the big deal that you guys are making it out to be. You would use a public scare campaign to try and scare the public into actually taking votes away from me, honest votes, to just achieve your ends. That's despicable that you would use fear to do that. I mean, he was smoking a cigarette in the hole. This kid, he's the stepson of my secretary in my office.
Counselor, you have the final minute.
Thank you. It's so interesting. That's exactly how I would expect you to answer that question. It's unfortunate that you did. It doesn't matter whether or not. I'm sickened by the whole entire thing. There is no way that that you cared about the safety of the residents. When that car accident, thank God the car accident happened, and Bay State Gas came out, or Columbia Gas came out, the manhole, they traced that gas back right to there. It was proven that was it. They pulled the pipe right out of the ground. They covered it up, and then within 4 days, the manhole was 100% natural gas. There was a gas stub that was hit. Your superintendent, your ride or die chick, she actually said that right here on the council floor.
That wraps up the question and answer portion of tonight's debate. It's now time for closing statements. The candidates will each have 3 minutes, and the first to deliver his closing statement will be Mayor Harrop.
Thank you, Peter. First, I want to say that the ripping out of the gas line never happened. I mean, it's just that, no, it didn't. It just didn't happen. There was no cover-up. That's just not true. To my closing statement, though, as I said earlier, this job is the most rewarding job I've ever had. I really do enjoy the work. I would like to go for another 2 years to continue to do a lot of the work that we started. As I've talked about before, and I can name names, I can name dates of meetings, I can name very specific action items that we're taking to improve the downtown. It's far more nuanced to do economic development than I know people. I know people too, I'm naming people. I love doing this type of work. It's exciting to come up with different ways to solve public policy problems. The work that the city does is it's about serving the people, and I like to take part of that for a maximum of 3 terms. I've said that before. I won't be mayor for more than 3 terms. The different departments, they're the ones who are really doing the work. My job as mayor is to make sure that these different departments have the resources they need and to spread around what limited resources we have. This job, it's very challenging. It's very enjoyable. I look forward to another 2 years of it, because in the next 2 years, we're going to see a lot of changes in the downtown area. A lot of buildings are going through the process of getting the permits. We have new buyers looking to buy buildings. We just had an offer put down by a lawyer from Southeastern, on the Canada building across the street from the Sun Chronicle. He as soon as he put the offer down, he contacted me to say, what's our shared vision? That's a good thing. This is how you want things to happen. Just looking at the time note. As I said before, there's just so many good things going on in the city. I really enjoy doing this type of work. And, as far as having accomplishments, yeah, I've run on accomplishments, because in the first term, the city department heads and we've gotten a lot done together. The city department heads are the ones who tell me what their needs are, and then I do the best I can to make sure those needs are met. I go to the council for funding. The councilor herself, she votes for, I would say, most of that, and that's appreciated. As I said, though, this job, I'm repeating myself, I really enjoy this job. I would like to do another 2 years at this job. There's a lot of good things we have going on in the city, and I believe that the relationships that I have with the department heads and the different people that are working on these projects, we will be better off as a result of my time as mayor for another 2 years. So thank you.
Councilor Parika, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I think the biggest difference between my opponent and I hinges on one thing: what it means to be an executive. My opponent believes that it's about being the boss. As you've heard, he spends a good deal of time and energy telling people, department heads, municipal councilors, and even you, the citizens of Attleboro, what they can and cannot do. He often says, stay in your lane. He ordered department heads not to talk to the media without talking to him first. He's forbidden department heads from speaking to municipal councilors. He blasts any city council member who speaks directly with the city department or one of their line employees. He has said that any department head that has a significant difference of opinion over direction, then this might not be the right job for them. I'm the vice president of the municipal council. I'm a lawmaker for the city, and I know that we need roles and responsibilities within government. Those roles were put in place to safeguard the balance of power. These are people who are trying to work together for the better of Attleboro. The balance of power isn't at risk here. What is at risk is vital communication, understanding, and collaboration. That is what I bring to this election, and it's what I bring to the city. I am at heart a community organizer. I work with people to try to achieve great things for this city. In this campaign, you've heard my opponent talk about his accomplishments. He's tried to slice and dice mine apart. He's very concerned about taking credit. Can I take sole credit for the wildly successful Attleboro Farmers Market? Absolutely not. But does anyone really believe that my vision and my leadership were not at the heart of the success? Can I take credit for the new high school being passed? No, but I was there doing my part. He wasn't. Unlike my opponent, this isn't about me. This is not about being fearful that others might take credit for my work. This is about Attleboro. In my vision for Attleboro, we work together. Department heads and employees need to feel safe to state their opinions and utilize their expertise without fear of retribution. Council members need to be able to work on behalf of our constituents without fear of being blasted through email or through the media. Unions and city employees need to feel heard and understood. As a new mayor, I will need to hear differences of an opinion. Neither my ego nor my understanding of the balance of power are threatened by the difference of an opinion. Attleboro, we can have it all. A Parika administration gives our city the best of both worlds. Continued progress in our downtown with the added ability to create, maintain, and grow positive working relationships. What I bring to this election is the hope and promise for renewed communication and collaboration. Attleboro is a gem, and we all know it. And we have amazing people and resources in this city. I'm asking for your support to continue my lifelong journey of empowering and collaborating with others to make Attleboro even better. And I ask for your vote on November 4th. Thank you. November 5th. Woo.
November 5th.
25th. 4th is my daughter's birthday. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you to our three panelists, Mike, Tom, and Bill. Thank you to our timer, Bridget. The people here at City Hall, they were so accommodating. Jim Jones and the AACS staff, and those of you here in person and those of you watching at home on cable television. The polls will open at 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. on Tuesday, November 5th. Voters in Ward 1 will cast ballots at the Robert J. Coelho Middle School, 99 Brown Street. Ward 2 at the Good News Chapel at 235 West Street. Ward 3 at the St. John's Catholic Parish Center at 1 St. John Place. Wards 4 and 5 at the La Salette Shrine Welcome Center at 947 Park Street. And Ward 6 at the Elks Lodge at 887 South Main Street. Election results will be announced on AACS Channel 15 after the polls closed. In addition to the position of mayor, the city clerk, the city council, and school committee will be determined. So please take time and go to the polls. The future of the city, as always, is at stake. On behalf of Executive Editor and General Manager Craig Borges and everyone at the Sun Chronicle, have a great night.